Before we start painting the field, we must go over warnings. One warning is the spray paint for lining fields is permanent and will stain your clothes. For the first step in lining a lacrosse field, we'll begin by measuring the end line. To measure the end line, we'll put a stake in a corner of the field and measure out 60 yards. Once we've measured out 60 yards, we'll begin to stretch the string line across the field. Once we have the string line stretched across the field, we'll put a painted dot there to mark our place on each end of the end line. Our next step will be to measure out and mark the sidelines. The sidelines will run perpendicular to the end line and be attached at the corner. First step is to measure out the sidelines 110 yards. Once you've measured out 110 yards, attach a piece of string line to the end of your end line and walk it straight out, pulling it tight. Once this string line is in place, mark your end line with a dot of spray paint. Don't forget to repeat this step on the other side of the field. Now it's time to mark your end line. The end line is a line that marks the middle of the field that stretches from sideline to sideline. To do this, first mark your spot at the 55-yard mark on the field. Now measure straight across and make sure it's 50 yards from sideline to sideline. Mark each side of the midline with small dots to hold your place. Now it's time to square the field to check to make sure you have a perfect box. To do this, you'll measure from one corner of the sideline or the end line to the corner of the midline. To calculate the length of this distance, use the Pythagorean theorem: a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If your formula matches the measurement, you have a perfect square and are good to continue lining the field. It's time to mark the box lines. The box lines are lines that run parallel to the sidelines and are 20 yards inside of the field. To do this, measure 20 yards from your sideline along your end line and then measure 35 yards up from your end line. Once you have measured up, you can mark a small dot with spray paint to mark your box line. Don't forget to do this to the other side. You must again square the field, but this time only inside the box line. Measure from one side to the other using the Pythagorean theorem to assure you have a perfectly square box to continue lining the field. Now it is time to finish your box. To do this, you will drag a string line from one sideline to the other to connect both box lines that you've already made. Now it is time to begin lining your first half of the field. Before you begin lining your field, be sure that your paint is shaken thoroughly and placed properly into the paint sprayer. After placing your paint, be sure your string lines are tight. Then begin lining the side lines, end lines, box lines by following closely on the string lines holding your place. Make sure you go slow to ensure a nice and thick line. It's time to paint the X and wing areas at midfield. Start by painting the X. Find a spot in the middle of the field. It doesn't have to be an exact measurement, and spray an X about 3 foot wide. Now, to create your wing area, place a stake on the sidelines in the midline. Measure out 10 yards onto the field. Once you have reached 10 yards, place another stake and begin measuring 10 yards on each side of the midline. The wing area will be 20 yards total. Once you have measured each side, you can mark a spray painted dot at each 10-yard mark. Now, with your sprayer, spray a line connecting each dot to the midfield line, and you have created your wing area. Be sure to repeat these steps for your wing area on the opposite side of the field. Now we'll begin measuring our lines for our crease and goal line. Start by placing a stake where the box line meets the end line and measuring 20 yards to the middle of the field from that point. Once you have found the middle of the field, place a stake at that point and measure 15 yards up to the middle of the field. This will be the middle of your goal line. Now that you have found the middle of your goal line, measure out 6 feet, having 3 feet on each side, and spray paint a line to meet that measurement. Now we can begin working on the crease. The crease is a circle with a 9-foot radius that is outside of the goal. First, start by measuring out 9 feet of string line. Once you have measured out 9 feet of string line, take a little extra string line and wrap it around a can of spray paint. Pin that spray paint to the middle of the goal line and holding it extremely tight, spray and walk in a circle along that rope, keeping it tight the entire time. This will allow you to have the perfect 9-foot radius circle. Now it's time to begin to make your penalty area. Start at the midfield line and place a stake and walk out from the field 6 yards and mark it. Now that you have a mark 6 yards outside of the field, you can paint it with the paint sprayer. Once you are done painting it, place a stake at the end of the line. Attach the measuring tape to that stake and measure out 10 yards on each side. Mark each side with a dot of spray paint. Now you can spray paint the lines. The total length of the penalty area should be 20 yards, with 10 yards from each side of the middle line. Once you have finished painting the lines, connect the end of the lines to the field. Be sure to do this for both sides. It's time to paint the player and coaches area. The player and coaches area is a dashed line that separates players and coaches. Start at the corner of the penalty area and paint out 10 yards of dashed line. Now that you have painted out 10 yards, create a dashed line that connects the players and coaches area to the sideline. For the final step of the project, you will be finishing off the field. To do this, you must go to the other half of the field and repeat steps 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. Once you have completed these steps, you will have finished your lacrosse field.